Hi, I'm Max, and in this video, I'll be talking about 80s cinema, how it affects current day cinema, how it got created, and what the inspirations were. From Lucas to Spielberg, I'll be talking about everything you should know about. Let's start! First off, George Lucas, who created maybe the most famous film franchise of all time, Star Wars. And while it is praised as being creative, the original inspiration was actually a serial that George Lucas watched growing up called Flash Gordon. And after not being able to get the rights to actually making the Flash Gordon movie, he decided to get his own take on it, which eventually became Star Wars. Now, while this video is about 80s movies, the original Star Wars movie, A New Hope, came out in 1977, but it wasn't until 1980 that it was a franchise with its first sequel, The Empire Strikes Back, which was more critically successful, making it an 80s movie in its prime. Next up, Tim Burton's Batman franchise, which was a great accomplishment when it came to superhero movies, because back in the 80s, they were still seen as kids' stuff. And after the first movie proved that a movie can be about superheroes and still be dark and gritty and successful, it showed the studio that they wanted to make a sequel. So they made Batman Returns, which did not do quite as well. Many people complained that it was too dark and gritty, specifically too violent, which caused in deals with toys such as Happy Meals to be pulled. So, for the third movie, they changed Tim Burton to a producer, making Joel Schumacher the director of the third and final movie, Batman Forever, which coincidentally also happened with George Lucas. Next up, Steven Spielberg, who's not only one of the most successful 80s directors of all time, but one of the most successful directors of all time. And unlike Burton or Lucas, his success can't just be contained with one movie franchise or movie. There are a ton that he is known for. For example, the first movie in the Indiana Jones franchise, Raiders of the Lost Ark, which was a huge success and got the ball rolling for the rest of his 80s movies, which would be both continuing the Indiana Jones franchise and directing new movies like E.T. the Extraterrestrial. And directing is not the only place he was successful in. He had an eye for good 80s movies because he produced 3 amazing movies of the 80s. Poltergeist, the Twilight Zone movie, and The Goonies. And those are 3 directors of the 80s who were successful for the 80s and also now, because their franchises extended past the 80s, the 80s, the 80s. And there are still a ton of 80s movies that I did not get to. Breakfast Club, Back to the Future, which is debatably the 80s movie. But even without those movies, I was able, I think, to round up everything that symbolizes what the 80s were like for cinema. Overall, they were successful, and the success of them is something that even modern-day filmmakers strive to accomplish. So, all in all, good job 80s. This has been the 80s, explained by a Gen-Zer.